Hey friends, it's Crystal Trammell with rethinkbirth.com. Today I want to share a little bit about how to have a blissful pregnancy. So, pregnancy is a time of change. There's a lot of challenges that come up with any kind of rapid change, and especially in the times in our world right now, things are kind of really weird. And so it can be really hard to kind of get out of our heads and drop into our heart space and really enjoy being pregnant. Now it's kind of a funny thing that I'm teaching this class because I have 5 kiddos of my own, and throughout all of my pregnancies, I never did really figure out how to enjoy pregnancy. I was kind of really having a hard time. I wasn't comfortable in my body, and my emotions were all over the place. And so I think that pregnancy can really be a challenging time for a lot of people, even in the best of times. And then right now we're in this really strange time in our world where we're maybe more isolated than we would be normally. And so being pregnant now is a unique experience. So that's why I really wanted to share what I have found that may or may not be helpful for getting you to enjoy your pregnancy a little bit more, even if we don't get to bliss per se. So, one of the things that I really want to talk about is um, in our culture, we tend to view pregnancy as something that happens to you. Um, it's almost like we're expected to be passive, like we're a vessel of some sort, and we but which is a problem in our culture that prizes and values being in control so much. Uh, People who have, everything under control, have their lives really, well curated. These are the people that we say, they've got it together. Whereas pregnancy kind of just happens and it takes charge and keeps going. And sometimes we are left feeling like a little bit bowled over about that our body is changing so rapidly and everything is kind of just, in flow. And then you have maybe some nervousness and anxiety about what the birth's going to be like, because that is very much a primal experience. I think there's no other time in a woman's life where she is more aware of the fact that we are, biologically speaking, mammals. It is very primal, very raw, and a very intense experience. And the rest of modern culture, we tend to act like we're separate from the animal kingdom, and that doesn't have anything to do with us. And so pregnancy can really bring up a lot of big emotions around that. So the thing that I have found to be very empowering is focusing on the choices that we do have, and that we are able to kind of reframe so many things in our lives as choices. Because if we're caught in the feeling of everything is happening to us and we have to do this and we have no choice about that and things are just kind of happening, it can feel very disempowering. It can really shut down our sense of agency about our lives, and that can be a real challenge. So I really love framing everything that we're doing as choices to move through this journey, and knowing and understanding that when it's challenging, we can remind ourselves that this is temporary, that we're walking a path that we will not be on forever. It's about a year out of our lives, of intense newness and different things coming at us, but we will not lose the core of our identity through the process. So another thing I think that um, can be challenging during pregnancy is we have anticipation of the pain of labor. So our modern culture has kind of primed us. I mean, we've seen birth and pregnancy depicted in movies, and there's screaming and there's like lots of carrying on, and it's very much framed as this is going to be worse than a root canal. It's going to be the worst pain. Um, and I think it's very important to be clear about that. Pain during labor is pain with a purpose, whereas um, a lot of people, who kind of want to criticize, like, why would anybody want to not have pain medicine for birth or for labor? You wouldn't go to the dentist and say, "Oh, don't give me any Novocaine, doc. I'm good." Um, the thing is, the pain of labor and birthing is different, is fundamentally different than the pain that we feel if we have a cavity or if we skin our knee, because pain is actually a communication tool from our body. So pain is an indicator that says something is wrong. However, the sensations of labor and contractions, we know that they are going to happen, and therefore we can prime our brain and our awareness that this is not a sign that something is wrong. This is a different kind of pain. This is pain that says things are going right. The pain of labor is an indicator that baby is on their way. And yes, it's intense. Yes, it is not the most comfortable thing in the world. However, it is a fundamentally different sensation. And if we spend time during our pregnancies to work on reframing our ability to cope with pain and to be aware that pain is a signal from our body telling us, pay attention. That's really what pain is. In my childbirth classes, I like to bring up that many, in the ancient times, leprosy was such a feared disease because the interesting thing is, leprosy is the disease in biblical times where they would have like open sores on their body, and people were kind of afraid of these people because they looked frightening, and they would often have infections that wouldn't get tended to. But specifically, leprosy is a disease of the nerves, and it takes away our body's ability to feel pain. So leprosy ends up being a deadly disease and even a frightening looking disease because the people who had contracted it in ancient times did not have the awareness of pain to draw their attention to, say, a little paper cut or an open sore, that's something that needed attention. And so they weren't able to tend to their bodies appropriately and therefore would get infections and die. So leprosy is as an interesting connection, showing us that pain, the sensation of pain in our body, has a very important purpose. It's to keep us safe. It's to keep us aware. It's to draw our attention to this needs input. And so if there's many ways. I highly recommend taking a natural childbirth course if you're interested in exploring this, because the pain of labor is not equivalent to the pain of a root canal. And they serve different purposes, obviously. There is pain that says something's wrong, and there's pain that says pay attention. So, and you might think that I'm being a proponent for natural birth here. Subjectively, I am glad that I had natural, pain medication-free births with all of my children. However, I 1000% recognize that that is not for everybody. And I think that it's really important to be clear about people have different definitions of natural birth. And I don't think that it should be held as like a trophy or an achievement of some sort, because birth is birth. Cesarean birth is birth. Birth with an epidural, all sorts of birth is birth. There's not one that's better or worse than another. There's no trophy that's given out for I avoided all the things. And I think that even for those people who value natural birth and who are interested in natural birth, it can become an obsessive list of things to avoid. And that kind of thinking can be stressful and kind of overwhelming. And that can contribute to making your experience of pregnancy not as joyful, because if you're constantly worried about everything and you have resistance pushing you away from everything that comes at you, no, I don't want this, I don't want that, I don't want this, I don't want anything, that can feel very avoidant and very stressful. That is a stress-inducing setup for some people. And so it's important to recognize that you don't want to get too attached to the particulars of this type of birth or that type of birth. It's good to want what you want. Absolutely. Do your research. And if natural birth, if home birth, for instance, if birth with a midwife, if pain-free or pain medication-free birth calls to you, by all means, head for that. Do your research and learn about that, and hold the intention for that being the kind of birth that you would like to have. And that may or may not come to pass for you, but it's really important not to get too attached to the outcome, because ultimately, feeling the women who, if we go back and look at research about the women who feel good about their birth experience, you can look back and say, this was a good journey. It might have not been what I expected, but I feel good about the choices that I made and the support that I had. So those two things come up again and again in terms of women who feel good about their birth stories: choices and support. So if you're planning as a doula, I've been with so many people who, for instance, were planning a home birth and they ended up in the hospital and they ended up having a cesarean, and yet they still felt confident and supported and nurtured throughout the process, because it didn't feel like they were railroaded into something and they were afraid and they didn't have time to process it. Instead, the journey that they took might have diverged wildly from what they thought. They thought they were going to have, a home water birth with candles and, music playing or something, and they ended up birthing in the OR. This can still be a beautiful, supportive, positive experience, depending on if your choices are honored, if you feel like you have some choice, you have some autonomy in the process, and also if you have a good supportive team. So maybe that's your partner, maybe that's a doula, maybe that's a midwife or an OB who you feel like you can communicate clearly with. It doesn't necessarily mean, just because a birth is quote unquote natural doesn't mean that it's a good experience. Just because a birth is surgical doesn't mean that it's a bad experience. There's no such thing as a bad birth. We have a cultural legacy of birth also to think about. Often pregnancy will bring up a lot of big feelings and emotions around, it will cause us to think about all sorts of things like our own birth, or how our mothers, our parents' experience went. And things have changed a lot in our country since, say the early 1900s. In even just 100 years ago, maybe 150 years ago, women were primarily the attendants of birth. And so birth looked very different. And in the early days of when we had family doctors that would come with a big black bag and they'd show up at the farmhouse and hold space for a laboring mother, they often would refer to midwifery texts about the very wide range of normal in birth, because and as time has progressed, these definitions of what's normal and what's okay and what's safe have been narrowed down more and more and more. And so one of the more common reasons for interventions in a hospital birth has to do with failure to progress, because we have a very narrow definition about this is what labor should look like. And so knowing what that looks like as far as a timeline for you, for your OB, for your midwife, it's very important to have these conversations with them about what do they expect, what is normal, what is natural, what is likely to happen. This is also where a really solid childbirth class is going to be a wonderful boon for you, because labor tends to be very, very slow in the beginning and less intense. Then a shorter period of time is slightly more intense. And then the very end of it is high intensity, but it's usually the smallest amount of time. And so there's a very wide progression of time. You have a very long timeline. Some people will have kind of Braxton Hicks contractions very early on, and it can be very kind of nerve-wracking. It can interfere with your enjoyment of pregnancy if you're constantly on high alert for, is this labor? Is this it? Should I call somebody? Is it time? My general rule for is it time is, can you talk through a contraction? And if you absolutely have to be silent, focus, and go within to cope with the sensations in your body, that's probably when you should call. And, you know, that's probably when you need to go in and talk to someone. But it's good to have these conversations with your doula, with your care provider, so that, you know, they'll have their own definition for how often and what to talk about. Communication is very important in order to have a good relationship with the people who are on your support team. I think as women, a lot of us have been socialized since we were very, very young to just kind of nod and smile and don't make waves and don't rock the boat. And pregnancy is a very important time to speak up and to get specific, ask questions. If you don't like the answers or if you don't understand the answers, ask more questions, ask more specific questions, get the resources that you need to feel like you are confident and you are ready for the experience that you're facing in giving birth. That is going to go a long way toward helping you have a calm and confident pregnancy. Another thing that, another challenge that comes up with pregnancy is that a lot of relationships in our lives change, perhaps especially so the one with our parents, the one with those people who raised us. And there's a book I read recently called Untamed by Glennon Doyle. You might have heard of it. And one of the quotes that stand out to me from her book is that we cannot truly be responsible parents until we decide to become a disobedient daughter. In other words, there needs to be a shift in energy, effort, loyalty from our family of origin to the family that we are now creating. And that can show up in very many ways in our relationship with our partner, as well as our relationship with ourselves, like viewing ourselves as a parent as opposed to just who we are now. And there also may need to be shifts in the way that you relate to your family of origin, because they are used to seeing you as their baby. And once you have a baby, you're not really the baby anymore. And they need to honor and respect your transition and your journey into parenthood. All right, I want to talk a little bit about practical things to make your pregnancy really, really awesome. I would love to redefine self-care here as not something like pedicures and overpriced spa days, although you can go to a spa, do it, it's worth it. I want you to also think about enjoying pregnancy as a function of just feeling good in your body. And so looking at how you're nourishing your growing body, how much you're moving and what types of movement you're doing. What kind of rest and sleep are you getting? What is the quality, not just quantity, but quality of sleep and rest that you're getting? If you're not having naps, you probably need some naps. And last but not least, being aware of the connections in our lives socially. We are not meant to go alone. We're not meant to be isolated. And this year especially has been really unusual and maddening for that, because the social connections, the communal ties that support a new family as they come into parenthood, this is meant to be a social event. And even new babies, they're social creatures. It's unusual that we are coping with so much isolation. So hop on Zoom calls with your friends, do FaceTime calls, make sure to reach out, check on the people that you care about, even if it's just shooting them a quick text and sending memes, whatever is going to keep that social flow established. That's going to feel really good and nurturing to you. it's more than just nice things that you can do for yourself. Although on that topic, one of the things that I really highly recommend, I wish I would have done it for my own pregnancies, is to hire a photographer and do a pregnancy photo shoot. At the time, I was always convinced that I was too heavy and maybe my skin was a weird color and I didn't like how my hair looked. And I had a million reasons to say, oh, I don't want pictures, I don't want them. And in hindsight, I really, really wish that I would have had some pregnancy photos professionally done, because that can go a long way toward really recognizing the beautiful transition that you are currently experiencing. So go all out if you can do it. I would say go find an awesome spot in nature, maybe even somewhere where you can be naked, rent an Airbnb, maybe have somebody do your makeup professionally. You can go as big as you want to go with a pregnancy photo shoot. You can do themes, you can do costumes. It's October. Whatever makes you feel not just beautiful, but also empowered and fantastic and phenomenal, fully embodied in the dynamic place that you're in right now, because pregnancy is a time of change. And it can be really fun to kind of fully embody that and get some fantastic photos. In choosing a photographer, don't just look at price, don't just look at reviews, but when you connect with that person, like, do a vibe check. Are you guys vibing? Are you having an enjoyable conversation? Do they look like somebody you'd want to hang out with anyway? That's a good photographer for you. Other ideas: make sure that you are freeing up room in your budget and your schedule to do things like go to the spa, go see a chiropractor. If you're not sleeping well, chiropractors are magic. They can do things to your hips that you didn't know you needed done. Acupuncture is fantastic for all sorts of aches and pains, as well as emotional issues or challenges that you may be facing. Massage can be brilliant, especially if you're still working, if you're hunched over a computer a lot, working on your shoulders and your back. Massage therapy is a fantastic thing. There's also something that I would highly recommend, and it's here in Austin specifically. It may be also in other bigger cities. Look into float therapy. There are places, I know there's one called Zero Gravity, and the idea is, imagine a gigantic Epsom salt bath filled with so much salt that your body naturally floats. And you can be in darkness or you could have a little light, but it's just a brilliant soak. Now, my friend Lucretia already talked about the benefits of magnesium for your nutrition, as well as clearing constipation. And magnesium salt baths are a wonderful way to get in more of that nutrient and also to help you hydrate. Not to mention, your baby is currently in their own little personal ocean right now. And when you are in water, not only does it take the stress off of your joints and your physical body, but it also provides a wonderful way of feeling a little bit closer to your baby. It can be like an enveloping womb for yourself. It sounds maybe a little weird, but it's a wonderful way to relax and really connect with that new life inside of you. So float therapy, I highly recommend it. And if you can't do float therapy, pour yourself a bubble bath, make yourself a nice cup of herbal tea, buy the good honey, you know what I mean, the butter honey, get some of that, go to the farmer's market, get yourself whatever food that you really love. I highly recommend go look at the farmer's market and see if there's an artisan that locally makes or sells that product. It's worth it. These little indulgences are ways that you can connect with your body and your heart and remind yourself that this is what love feels like, that you're prioritizing loving yourself and your body. If you are a reader, take time to read books. It doesn't have to be a pregnancy book. If you want to read trashy romance novels, those will help too. Feeling beautiful is really important. So whatever you can do to feel more beautiful in your body, whether that's getting, figuring out how to get your hair done, maybe doing your makeup, uh, pedicures, whatever it is, if those things fill your tank and make you feel fantastic, prioritize them, do them. And if you don't really care about that stuff, then skip them and do other things. More than anything, I would say take time to explore your dreams. Like maybe you're sleeping more. That's great. Maybe you're having really weird dreams. Pregnancy is a common time to have really zany, off the wall dreams. It doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean that you're going to be like a crazy person. It's just that when your body is flooded with hormones, a lot's going on and you often have crazy dreams. So it can be fun to write them down. Maybe you can kind of do a little like, pseudo analysis of what they mean. It can be sometimes fun and funny to find out those things and make note of them. And finally, the last tip that I would say to you, even if you're not an artistic person, I highly recommend taking time to be creative. Whatever creative outlet you have, take a little bit of time to do that. It can be painting, it can be drawing, it can be pottery, it could be writing, it could be making stone mandalas in your backyard. It could be anything that makes you feel creative, that maybe doesn't involve a screen or the internet or social media. Something that you can kind of reconnect with the analog world and let your creativity flow. Even if it's just take some crayons, take a big piece of paper and scribble with your toddlers. That can be actually really fantastic and liberating. And a lot of birth classes will include a section on art. I remember the very first birth class I took when I had my first baby 22 years ago. And they had us do birth art. And at the time I was like, this is so weird. I don't think this is a good idea. But I got some crayons and color pencils and kind of went along with it. And even now I have that memory of that it felt good to kind of get my feelings out on paper, even if it was like scribbles with a red and black crayon. So look for opportunities to be creative, explore the things that make you happy, because the you that you are, the you that you were before you conceived, you're never going to lose that person. You are in the midst of a monumental change. Pregnancy is this huge journey of transition. No one can really, do it for you. There's a bridge that you have to cross alone into labor land and into the land of new parenthood. And it can be a little bit scary, but you have everything you need inside of you. Create that to undertake that journey and to come out on the other side, and you will still retain the core of who you are. Your personality, the things that make you you will still be there, and they will be there to enrich and nourish your child's life as they grow. Because you, the parent, it's still you. Your childhood self is still in there somewhere, and it's very important to kind of try to find ways to reconnect and to not lose those threads of who you are. So that is what I've got for you today on enjoying your pregnancy. And I hope that you are able to implement some of these tips. And I hope that you're able to kind of enjoy the journey, even if it is not at all what you expected. Sending you much love. I'm Crystal from rethinkbirth.com. Bye.